Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Our show is brought to you by UCAN. On today's episode, we have Morning Chalk Ups Joey Adduci and Dex Hopkins here to discuss how big of a weakness a champion can have. When looking at champions like Justin Medeiros and Tia-Clair Toomey, neither have a huge weakness that they struggle with so much that it prevents them from being champions. Recently at the Rogue Invitational, even with a 19th placement in the strict handstand push-up event, we saw that Laura Horvath still was able to stand at the top of the podium. Joey, if we're looking at the games field, how much better of a placement would Laura need to get an event like that for some damage control to potentially stand at the top of the podium?
Yeah, I think it's going to really depend on who's in the field. So if Tia is in the field, her margin for error is going to be a lot smaller. Just looking at some of Tia's consistency, she's only finished outside the top 10 6 times since Laura came into the game in 2018. If Tia does retire, though, looking into the future, she has a lot more wiggle room for that. If you look at the 2 years she finished second, she was extremely consistent. Her worst finish in 2021 was 19th. And then if you look at 2018, her rookie year, her worst finish was 21st in the clean and jerk ladder. So, if she can put together something inside the top 20, there's no reason she can't take it home if Tia's not in the field.
Dex, what are your thoughts, especially being at Rogue and seeing how Laura performed just a couple weekends ago?
It has been the weirdest missing piece to that puzzle because she is so fit. I think the skill set she brings in, being like a competitive rock climber, stuff like that, is an insane skill to come in, especially on the female side, because upper body pulling just traditionally is not a female, thing they bring in. And so it's a huge strength. And just she is fit and she is good at CrossFit. And it has been years and years that's been an issue in any variance or whatever the curveball is with vertical pressing they throw at her, where she can't really use her hips if it's any kind of strict stuff. But I think Jay hit it on the head. If it depends on the field, we see that you got to throw more darts into the bullseye when those guys are there that are going to be all top fives and stuff like that. So you can't. I think the years of being able to have a fumble on the big stage are kind of gone. In a field of 10 at Rogue, okay, it's a little different, or whatever we had there. But it's so weird that everything else is so good, and she's been so good for so long, making people sound like that. And so it's yeah, she's good. She's tough. They're resilient. But yeah, she great athlete across the board. That's just like one thing. It's crazy.
Well, and if we're talking about a similar storyline for past champions like Frazier or even the early years of Tia, did they have any similar weaknesses that maybe they were good enough at to not affect their position on the leaderboard, but that they eventually overcame and made less of a weakness?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look across the board at repeat champions, first things to start with is looking at age. So Laura is only 25. She's going to be 26 in this upcoming year's game. So she's still really young. Tia was 24 when she won her first games, and Frazier didn't win until he was 27. So she's right in that ballpark. And if you look back at the history, Tia had a lot of fumbles with handstand walkings when the years that Katrin was beating her, and that really held her back. Frazier was notoriously giving poor performances in the sprinting events. And then even if you look back to Froning, swimming and distance running is what were his holes. But over time, they consistently filled those holes. And that's why they were able to be as dominant as they were.
I think it's the weird evolution of the game too, right? I'll never forget seeing Rich walk on the 333. I'll never forget seeing Rich not be able to do a rope climb if you're going to go way back. And so now if you look at Mayhem programming right now, there's a million GHDs, there's a million rope climbs, legless and otherwise, every week. But yeah, I think that's the evolution of the game, and that speaks to the professionalism of it as far as like the role the athlete has to take to outsource things that are not theirs. They seek out the professional, right? Matt sought out Chris Henshaw, sought out some people to do sprint work, so he quit making that sound when sprint stuff came up. And and so but that's what it is. It brings in more professionals to professionalize things and give you the ability to fill in the nooks and crannies and stuff like that. And I think that's the progression of the game.
Yeah, for sure. To this point, too, like you was saying, Matt was notorious for he had a poor event in the sprint, and he literally went and ran with a high school or middle school track team to work on sprinting. He had a poor performance after the trail run when he had the deadlift. He finished poorly in the deadlift. He went and worked with Chad Smith, who is an expert power lifter. So it's really about, like he's saying, seeking out those experts and diving into those weaknesses to fill those holes.
But I think when we look at somebody like Laura Horvath, I mean, she is so fit. We've seen her time and time again, like be so excellent at all of these other movements. Like in my mind, there's no way that she's not training handstand push-ups. But how does the like unknown and unknowable play a part into this? Because we've seen so many variations of the handstand push-up. We've seen the deficit from just the plates. We've seen it with the parallettes. We've seen wall facing handstand push-ups. Like, how does that work into the conversation of training a weakness like this?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great point. I think that something for the average listener to take into note is that standards make a huge difference. So it's really easy to have that step back and say, she's bad at handstand push-ups. But if you really dive into like Rogue recently, that standard was completely different than a lot of the other handstand push-up standards they had. Those base plates were 6 inches apart. So they had an extremely narrow grip and they had to keep their feet close enough inside the parallettes or it was a no rep. So there's little standards like that that make a huge difference. So to the unknown and unknowable, really it's just are they practicing these and anticipating these different standards? And because there's so many different variations, it's something that they're going to have to consistently toss into their training. That's if you think back for the average listener too, at back in 2018 when they introduced that tape line for us in the open, people who thought they were good at handstand push-ups had a rude awakening and they're like, I guess I'm not good at handstand push-ups. So I guess that's the easiest way for you to kind of relate to how, maybe some of these expert athletes feel when they get those new standards introduced on the spot.
This episode is brought to you by UCAN. Who can? You can. At least I can with UCAN with one of their easy squeeze pouches that give me the energy I need to get through my workout without causing a crash. When I work out early in the morning but don't want to on an empty stomach because we know mid-wad I'm going to be hangry, I grab one of their super easy on the stomach bars. Chocolate almond butter? Yes, please. I may not be a Games athlete yet, but UCAN helps me stay focused and energized during my workouts. It delivers steady release carbs for long-lasting energy without spiking blood sugar levels, the key to sustaining peak performance and focus and recording videos like these. Trusted by top CrossFit pros like Scott Panchik and Emily Rolfe, get your hands on these goodies and even save 20% on your first order with our code CHALKUP. Link in the description. Now back to the episode.
The unknown and unknowable for like what the standard's going to be is probably my least favorite thing. The tape line I thought was the best version of that, right? What was the worst? The worst version was the. Are you talking about the box or the actual? Oh gosh, so
no, yeah, the over. That's the one that kept Jacob Hebner out of the games that year. That's when he didn't
and then the
qualify.
next year he did them on his fists.
Exactly. Yeah. So standards make a difference.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. And yeah, so I had seen at Wadapalooza for years or whenever you could not move the parallettes or, event to event. I think at the games in 2015, they didn't let us do it in the final on the tennis court for teams. And so it's weird what they enforce and how that affects it. But, in my camp, I coached for brute strength. We saw that with Emma Carey at Granite Games a few years ago when her first strong showing. They wouldn't let them move things or do it, wider or the normal stroke you would have like in the affiliate or wherever we're doing it. But, now she trains them tight, right? And so it's a variance thing, and it gives you more layers to put into training for the coaches and all those things. But, like, that's been such a consistent, like, weird issue mechanically or just strength. And it's, to me, seems like a really straightforward thing to try and fix. And so, like, there's a lot of question marks in my program brain of, like, why that's still a thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, the biggest thing too is everybody kind of has that same observation. It's like, she's so good. How has she not worked on this thing? And if you really look at who she's working with, she's been working with Ben Smith the last couple of years. He's notorious for being one of the most well-rounded athletes. So that he's programming this stuff for her. So it's definitely one of those things that it could come back to maybe, she needs to do more accessory work. We don't know, but that's her coach's, job on that side of things. And he'll be taking care of that. But it's really, can she cut these finishes from top, 30 down to inside the top 20 when she really needs it?
Is that possible though, when the standard for like arguably her biggest weakness keeps changing? It's not like a running standard changes. I mean, maybe from like running to like a shuttle sprint, but I mean, running is running essentially, right?
Yeah. Field goals are field goals. The size of the end zone doesn't change. The football's the same size every week. Then these are the things, right? Like we always talk about the money as a professionalism, but I think the standardization across the board is also a big deal, right? So we need to know field of play will change, obviously, but like those things can't change, right? Like what we shoot into a wall ball, that's fine, like what the target is. And we went higher this year at the games, thought that was cool. But yeah, I think that is a weird wrinkle to work around, and that's always going to be, I hate to say, the nature of the game with the like pride they put on the unknown and unknowable, version of CrossFit and that facet. But yeah, I hate to see that be a thing that limits or somebody's expression of their body of work that year when you're trying to do it at a professional level, and she still does it really well. Like I would hate to, it's ridiculous to think that's a thing that keeps her from, or it's just her whole, and she's still been on the podium and she's still done as well as she has. And that's terrifying because the capacity is there. And that was not a, program wise, not a knock to Ben Smith. I know for sure Ben is one of the best movers and has the most consistent body of work. I was at a semifinal with him last year, and that was, I don't think I told anybody, it was one of the coolest things to be in a heat with Ben, just because I had, in my CrossFit life, I've seen Ben go and do. I was there the year he won. And so, that was cool for me to be able to do.
Most of us grew up watching him, train in his garage and kind of lay the foundation for the rest of us. He's a legend for sure.
It's just the only reason I have a fridge in my garage gym. That's it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree to that point, though. I think that, part of the tenets of the CrossFit Games is the hopper model. That's kind of where it all started. So these athletes need to be prepared for the unknown and the unknowable, and they need to be ready for all these different standards, all these different variations. So although it's unfortunate sometimes, the other 39 athletes that are there also have to deal with it. So it's really just going to be, like he was saying, who's there competing, and also how many events can she really make up for it. You saw this year, she made that charge and, came back and finished on the podium. So a lot of it's just going to depend on that. But if she can shore up those weaknesses the best of her ability in the next 5 years, not just this year, that's where, she definitely could win multiple games.
I wonder if there's like an injury, like a history or injury history that we don't know about. Because like I said, competitive rock climber, the upper body strength is there. So is there something that keeps her from recruiting the right muscles, or because positionally I've watched it, like the nerd in me wants to look at positions, like where are you lacking? Are there things shutting off? Is there a range of motion you don't have or something like that? And she has all those things. And so I wonder if there's like an injury history that prevents her from doing this. And so, but that's a question for her. But I've peeled the brain.
We have a future bottom line guest right there.
She has many bottom lines. It's almost bedtime. This is Say what's up, dude. Can you say hello? Okay, thank you. Yeah, back on mute. Here we
go. Joey, what is your bottom line? How big of a weakness can a champion actually have?
I think it's really dependent on who's in the field, like we were saying earlier. In terms of Laura, if she can keep those finishes inside the top 20, she's for sure going to finish in the top 3. It's just a matter of what the programming looks like. If Tia's not in the field, if she can stay inside the top 20, I don't see any reason why she wouldn't win the games if she could hit some home runs like she did at Rogue.
Dex, what's your bottom line?
I think they can have weaknesses. You can't keep it. All right, Rich has to learn to climb a rope. Matt has to learn how to sprint. I can't remember what Tia was bad at. Handstand wall, kinda. But then now nothing. I think you can have it. You can't keep it. And I think she had her tool bag so deep for everything else that it'll come. And I think with Tia kind of being on the twilight, I think it'll be at the right time.
All right, Dex back to dad duty. I'm going to drink some tea. Joey is here holding it together for all of us.
Say bye-bye.
All the time. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you next time.